Hi, I'm Tim of 1916. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. I'm still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for your purchase and pricing details of this or any of our watches. Reach out to me directly. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a watch that I featured before, but I will never pass up an opportunity to present one of my favorite watches of all time. Launched in 2017, as you see here, with blue dial, bezel, and titanium case. This is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. This is the reference 5015, the big boy, 45 millimeters in diameter, 15.5 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip, 50.6 millimeters with a 23 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw this on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it wears beautifully. You can see that it does push out to the edge of my wrist, but not over the edge of my wrist, especially since this over-the-top shot tends to exaggerate the width of the watch, and I'm pulling the strap very tight. The way to look at this is down the barrel, where the lugs push out to the edge, but not over the edge. And being made almost entirely of titanium and sapphire, this is a very light watch. Let me move out. Previous times I featured this watch, I haven't shown you it in the context of the size of my hand or the size of my arm. Actually quite a bit bigger than you might suspect, so this watch wears well. If your wrist is 16 centimeters circumference or larger, you could wear this watch. Let's get a little bit closer. Take a look at the strap. It is sailcloth, a textile long used by Blancpain on its dive watches. It's almost impossible to tear or fray. It's blue with a monotone stitch, some stuffing or bolstering to give it volume. And then on the bottom, you can see no crimping, no gouging, brand new Blancpain factory strap with a rubber inlay on the bottom, so it's supple against the wrist, and it also keeps the dirt of the wrist, the heat, sweat, moisture, grit, separate from the textile material to keep it clean. We have a matching grade 23 titanium pin buckle right here that is model specific, 50 Fathoms. Of course, whether you believe 53 or 55 was year one for the 50 Fathoms, there is no arguing it is one of the original dive watches from that initial bumper crop of dive watches in the early to mid 1950s. The boom in both amateur diving and military diving brought watches like this into being. And in profile, this is actually more of a utilitarian look than the standard 5015, which has a full polished case. I really like this vertical satination, this brushed profile that mutes it. All high polish is a bit much with a watch of these dimensions, whereas this is just about ideal. Take a look at how the strap is held to the case. Screws and bars, and they used hex screws to prevent rounding off of the screw heads. This is a much more secure setup than spring bars, and I love to see it. Yes, it's more expensive, but with a watch like this, a flagship piece from a flagship Swatch Group brand, Blancpain spent money in the right place using screws and bars. The case is fairly familiar to Blancpain fans. You have a rounded mid case with the name over at 9 o'clock, and lugs that are broken out from the case band and terminate a little bit of a teardrop undertuck. We have an oversized crown with a sharp knurling, easy to grip, screw down 300-meter water resistance, and lovely narrow crown guard profiles. The bezel has a sharp outer knurling with a thunderous and distinct 120 click action. You line up the pearl with the hybrid broadsword and syringe minute hand, and now you track all the way from 0 to 60. I prefer this to a chronograph. Chronos can make it difficult if you've got something that's between 30 and 60 minutes to time, whereas this is more distinct, plus you don't have the downstream service costs of a chronograph. Now, since 2003 and the 50th anniversary piece, Blancpain has generally used the cambered sapphire on the bezel of the 50 Fathoms, which gives it a lovely wet look, almost like a dewdrop, magnifying the calibrations of the bezel. And being fully capped by scratch-resistant sapphire, the bezel can be fully lumed with no danger of having the lume knocked off or scratched by abrasion or impact. And you can see it gives you a lot more information being fully calibrated than a dive bezel that only gives you the luminescent pearl in the minute hand. Plus, we have those lovely and vivid quarter Arabic numerals as well as wedge-style indices applied to a dial that includes at its center a lovely brushed sunburst and then an opaline or lightly frosted track underneath the hours and the indices. We have a little date disc that sits between 4 and 5. A lot of people, myself included, like the fact that it doesn't replace an index. And I love the fact that the disc itself, being blue, matches the color of the dial. I will fire this watch up. We will take a quick look at how It runs in action. This is a watch that has 3 mighty mainspring barrels and a 120-hour minimum power reserve. These are known to run to within less than 1 second gained per day. Accuracy is outstanding, and with a very accurate watch, you want to be able to set it to the second, which is why hacking or stop seconds is included. The setting precision is outstanding, as the gearing ratio seems a little bit lower here than on most watches, meaning a small amount of turning will not actually displace the hand. So for every, I would say, degree of angular displacement, there's less motion to the hands, which makes it really easy to place the minute hand precisely. Now we've also got, let's just make sure we're not in the middle of the date change danger zone, and in fact we were. We've also got a quick set system right here, so you can rapidly cycle the date if you need to. And take a look, that 3 is the same as the 3 that's used on the dial, and the same as the 3 that's used on the bezel, and the same as the 3 that's used for the diving depth legend. I like that kind of design parallelism. And yes, I know, 300 meters is not 1,000 feet, but just press the I believe button. Everyone does it. Rolex gets away with it. Taking a look at the reverse side, a beautiful watch with movement to match. You can see the movement is properly sized for the case. We have a triple finished rotor in 18-karat white gold. It's been blackened for dramatic effect. The recessed surfaces are media blasted. The edge, as you can see, has been snailed outboard with a deep groove texture. And then we have a satination that runs in a relieved raised channel around the edge. And then finally, outboard of that, a mirrored bevel. You can see that the bevels on the bridges are remarkably mirrored. Likely started mechanically, but finished by hand. This is one of the broadest and most beautiful bevels I've ever seen in a mainstream watch. You can also see that all of the jewel sinks are internally beveled with that partridge eye effect characteristic of the best watches. And instead of kind of an antiquated Côte de Genève, a lovely snailing has been applied across the bridges. You can also see the screw heads are black polished with their slots and circumference chamfered. The wheels, where you can see them, are satinated. You can also see that solarization has been applied to some of the wheels in the winding system. And then finally, we have engine turning on the base plate and a free-sprung balance that's adjusted in no fewer than 6 positions. A chronometer is 5, this is 6. What are the 6? Dial up, dial down, crown left, crown right, crown up, crown down. And in general, it's going to be crown up or crown down where chronometers are not adjusted, where high horology movements like Longa and Vacheron are not adjusted. 6 positions gives you no place to hide the crap, whereas a lot of those other movements will run irregularly if you orient them in the one untested and unadjusted position. So 6 position adjustment, free sprung for precision of adjustment, as well as shock resistance, and an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring. We have 3 mainspring barrels, and the mainsprings not only give you 5 days of power reserve, but they're phased so that their torque curves collectively form an enormous 5-day plateau. So it's only at the very beginning of the wind and the very end that the watch doesn't keep outstanding time. And that's the key with a long power reserve. Keep the torque delivery flat, and with the 3 barrels and the phased mainsprings, Blancpain does that. And it is a high beat rate. They don't play any games with the beat rate. They don't lower it to achieve that longer power reserve. It's still 4 hertz or 8 beats per second. If you love this watch, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't, reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing.